Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, featuring my dad, the best coder ever.
Hey, this is Brian, and before we get into this week's episode about why most people fail at coding boot camps and the 3 things you should be looking out for to make sure that you do not fall into that bucket of people, I want to let you know that this week is the last week where you can apply for a major discount to Parsity, become a software engineer in 2024 with us, our incredible mentors, and our incredible career services coordinator. We're rolling out more new stuff, mock interviews, a cloud services project, as well as all the other things we've done to improve and just keep moving at the speed of tech. I hope to see you there. And without further ado, let's get into this week's episode. This is one of those episodes where if I had like a business manager or something like that, they'd probably say, don't record this episode. But I'm going to anyway, because guess what? I own Parsity and I can say whatever the heck I want. Because one thing about this show is that I will never give you advice that I haven't seen work for myself, others, or that I've done personally. So I'm about to tell you why most people will fail at coding boot camps. And you might be thinking, wait a second, don't you own a coding boot camp? And yeah, I do. But I also know it's not for everybody. And I know that we have admissions to get in. We try to filter out people we know won't work. I know it works because over 90% of the people that join get jobs. Of the people that follow everything we say, basically 100% of them get jobs. But maybe you should reconsider whether or not you actually want to go to one of these coding programs. People spend months, years, thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars on a coding boot camp, and then they fail to change careers. And I think this sucks. I've worked at multiple coding schools. I've mentored nearly 100 developers. I work full-time as a software engineer, and I've seen the same issues time and time again. Throughout my career, I also have always moonlighted, basically had a second job working at a coding boot camp. By the way, I went to a coding boot camp. I went to another one after being hired. And then I did basically an engineering mentorship program once I became a manager. And I'm going to do more and more programs the further I go in my career. It's just something I've come to accept and live with. And I think they're great because I can learn all this stuff on my own for sure. I've read tons of books about being a manager. I've read tons of books about writing code, but I want somebody that's actually done the thing to tell me how to do the thing. And I'm willing to pay for that because I've seen just how valuable it is. Why spend a year doing something if I can pay somebody else to do it much quicker and then get the monetary benefit? That's a whole separate other topic for another day in general. But I just know that mentorship is the shortcut that you can use to get where you want to go fast. So if you have the money and the time, do it. If you don't, I don't think there's anything wrong with going the self-taught route. And I've seen people excel in that. I will say that the people that go the self-taught route are a vocal minority, meaning you're going to hear a lot from them. They're very impressive. They tend to be people that are very, very self-motivated and driven and generally have taught themselves other skills. I wasn't necessarily one of those people, so I'm always going to opt to paying for knowledge really, really fast. Anyway, unfortunately, a lot of coding schools are out for really one thing, your money. And they sell you on this idea that anyone can learn to code and that the path to employment is through these trivial portfolio projects. Not so. Do I think everyone can learn to code? Sure. I think most will not. Everyone can learn to code in the same way that anyone is capable of developing a 6-pack of apps. Is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? No. Here's a few red flags I see with students who generally do not do well when they're learning to code. They chase dollars over desire, they have no time management skills, and they never learn the easy stuff. Now, as much as I want you to join Parsity, I think there's a lot of reasons you shouldn't. Ultimately, you got to understand whether or not you're the kind of person who's likely to succeed in an intense coding program, and then you should make your decision based on that. Now, again, this is just my experience. There's plenty of people who would defy some of these red flags, but let's dive in. Red flag number 1, the 6-figure mirage. Most people enter coding boot camps because they want more money. There's nothing wrong with this at all. I mean, maybe you don't know this, but we live in a capitalist society. Newsflash. So yeah, tech can pay a lot. I've seen my own salary increase 5 times over in the last decade. I've written about it. I've talked about it on this podcast before. I think that salary doesn't have to be a taboo subject. it'd be nice to learn more about what other people make. I credit one software engineer that I worked with at a boot camp. He was the lead instructor, and he was sharing with me what he made. And it really opened up my eyes to what was possible out there. I had no clue. I was making, 50, 60,000 at the time. He was making around 200,000 at the time. And I just didn't think that was possible until he said it. And then another guy said, oh yeah, I make around that same thing. And I'm like, whoa, you can do that? I mean, this is before there was so much material online that you could easily look up with this kind of stuff. It just wasn't out there. So having these guys open up about their own salaries was really, really helpful to me. So I know that there's a lot of money out there and I've benefited from it myself. Here's the other reality. Outside of tech hotspots like San Francisco, New York, Seattle, Austin, Miami, it's unlikely that your very first job is going to be the one that gets you this magical number in your head. But here's some important stuff. You can definitely get that on the second job if you play the game correctly. So personally, I started my career making, like I said, a little over what I was already making, like as an admin assistant. Basically the same, but way less security and way less benefits. So I kind of take a step down to make an incredible step up. So through a series of job hopping, negotiation, and improving my skills, my salary grew to an amount that I basically never really could have dreamed of. And it wasn't easy. I spent weekends creating side projects, trying to keep up with the computer science majors on the team. And if your only motivation for learning to code is money, if that's your only motivation, then I think you're likely underestimating just how much work outside of your regular job is going to be necessary to just keep up. And if you want to make that massive change from like junior to mid to senior and get those really insane pay raises that are possible, you're going to have to put in a lot of extra hours because you are ultimately competing with people that have gone to school, may have been writing code since high school, and you're likely an adult. So you have some time to make up. And that is definitely doable. I mean, I've done it. I know tons of people who have done it. I've met quite a lot of people that have transitioned in their 30s and 40s into tech. And now they're like managers, CTOs, heads of engineering. One guy that I went to a boot camp with, I think he runs his own company now. So I'm saying it's super possible. But there are other professions too, which you can make 6 figures a year. A hot dog vendor in New York can rake that in. I know a personal fitness trainer. He makes like nearly $1 million a year. My cousin learned to weld. He made around 100K or more. All I'm really saying is that there's other ways to get financial freedom than learning to code because it's an entire life type of journey. You don't just get to kick back at some point and say, hey, I'm just kind of done learning. I don't need to learn any more code. Code changes quick. Software changes quick. Tech changes quick. Red flag number 2. If you never have enough time, you need to reconsider whether a bootcamp style program is for you. Bootcamps are intensive by design. Parsity is intense by design. Now, we are luckily small enough and nimble enough to let people get breaks, to make sure we can swarm on a person with a lot of help and mentorship to make sure that they keep up. But yeah, it's a lot to learn. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There's a lot of stuff to learn. This is a 6-month program to try to get you in a hireable state by the end of it. Doing this requires a delicate balance between learning, practicing, and your personal responsibilities. Most people don't have a problem learning to code. Most people have a time management issue. They follow a pattern like this: no coding for 80% of the week, marathon coding session on their one day off. I have never seen this work. It's just not sustainable. I met a guy, I was an instructor at a boot camp previously, and he would say, man, I'm studying all this stuff. I just can't seem to get it down. I spent 8 hours yesterday going through all this material and it just doesn't seem to stick. And I was really curious about this. I'm like, man, that's crazy. Like, how is that possible? I thought, maybe there's like a mental issue. Maybe, the person has another condition that I'm not aware of. And I said, well, what about the other, days of the week? Like, what are you doing? And they're like, well, I work. And so basically that's my one day off. And I just spend that entire day, cramming in the material. And I thought, oh, that's why. Because I know for me, spending about 30 minutes a day kept the knowledge fresh and it built up on each other. And then on Sundays or Saturdays when I had some time off, I'd spend a few hours in a row building stuff. And that's what worked for me. And that's what I generally see work for other people. 1 hour a day will beat 6 on a Sunday. 30 minutes a day will likely get you further than attempting to cram all weekend long. The secret to success is ABC, always be coding. So the concepts you learn can build on each other, especially at this very early stage. Otherwise, you enter into the hamster wheel of doom, where you forget and then relearn and then forget, and then you relearn each week. And then a year goes by and then you turn around and you think, damn, I still don't know anything at all. I don't know anything at all. I'm basically stuck in the same place in a forever loop. Just not a fun place to be at all. The harsh reality is something is going to have to give. Here's the good part. You have some usual suspects that you can kill off. Sports, Netflix binges, IG, YouTube. Pick one. Go inside your phone, look at the little app that tells you how much screen time you're using, and think, what can I cut off here? Sports is a huge one, spending hours on a weekend looking at sports all the time. Now, this is coming from me, a person that knows nothing about freaking sports. So if that's like your one thing you can't live without, I get it. But there's usually something that's going to have to give. The one non-negotiable thing, though, is your exercise routine. That is super important, in my opinion. Exercise, coding, learning new habits go hand in hand. In fact, if I was going to restart learning to code now, I would pair it with an exercise routine. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, don't I need to have more time to focus on the code? Coding is a mental exercise, and having your body in a condition where you can be alert, be present, and also learning how to create a new schedule. They will build off of each other. They will feed off of each other. I totally believe this. I know it works for me. I know it works for people that are trying to fight addiction. I know that exercise is generally the key, is the foundation to so many other things in life. So if you're going to do one thing when you're learning to code, start an exercise routine. In fact, I spoke to a current student at Parsity who is doing that. I didn't suggest this to him, by the way. He just kind of found this on his own. This is that kind of weird tribal knowledge or something that humans are just born with. We just know that I got to go running. I got to go run somewhere. I got to go lift something heavy. I got to do something to get my blood flowing. And there's science to back this kind of stuff up that I don't really know well enough to talk about, but I know there's science to back up the fact that exercise and mental capacity are linked. So do something. Red flag number 3. You didn't learn anything before the program started. This is kind of mind-blowing to me. I'm thinking there's a lot of coding programs out there and they'll accept people with zero coding experience, like none. And it's even more shocking that people are willing to bet months of their life, thousands of dollars, on learning a skill they might actually hate. I actually saw this happen. This dude came in the program, did it, got a job, and then he's like, dude, I hate this. I'm like, oh, really? I'm like, oh, no. It was really deflating to hear that. He's like, I just don't like doing this. I don't like writing code for a living. And he quit, and now he's a police officer, and he seems much happier. Hey, go figure, right? And so for the love of Bob, go to a free program like Codecademy, see if you actually like this stuff, and then you want to come to Parsity or wherever. Here's what you should learn on your own: HTML, CSS, and some JavaScript. Some is very, very subjective. How much is some? I don't know. Go to our admissions challenge at Parsity. See if you can find our admissions challenge. And if you want it, just reach out to me. I'm happy to send it to you. That is a good metric to test because that is a tough challenge that we give out. And if you can pass it, we know you're ready for our program and you're likely ready for the majority of other programs out there. You want to learn this stuff on your own so you can hit the ground running and focus on the really difficult stuff that a good program like Parsity is going to teach you. Because when we get students, we have them go through a ton of pre-work before they come in so we can focus on the difficult stuff, which is why our students go full stack software engineer rather than front end, or rather than kind of like, the easy stuff that I think a lot of programs pick out, and then they wonder why people have such difficult time getting hired. So in conclusion, learning to code is one part of this game, but before you can code, you need to be the type of person who can learn to code, if that makes sense, right? Like you need to change sometimes fundamentally who you are. For me, that meant getting sober, working out, just getting a very different outlook on life before I could sit down and code. If I was trying to learn how to code and I was still involved with alcohol and drugs and other terrible things, there's zero way I would have been able to do that. If I didn't learn how to manage my time, there's zero way I would have been able to get hired so quickly after going to a coding bootcamp. Now, this isn't some kind of fluffy, feel-good advice. This is just practical stuff. How can you expect to change careers or learn a difficult skill and juggle life at the same time without a solid foundation? Life will never be in your favor. People have kids. I had kids at the time. I was working 2 jobs, just got sober. It was probably one of the worst times to learn how to code. But for me, it was a perfect time. I'm like, things are going pretty bad. How bad could they get, right? So I'm thinking, hey, I got nothing to lose. At this point, actually, when I'm very established, I get a little more nervous with these kind of gambles because I'm thinking, man, things are going so well right now. Things are going pretty chill, right? Like my kids are getting older. I've had a kind of a nice job, got a house and stuff. Now I'm more nervous to take these gambles. But when I had nothing, I'm like, well, what is the worst that can happen? I go into some debt. my credit was already ruined at that point. Anyway, I'm just saying that life is never going to be in a position that usually lends itself to doing one of these programs. So you have to put yourself in a position to do these kind of programs where you can juggle all this stuff at the same time. Now, obviously, there are worse and better times to do this, but like anything else, these skills can be learned. If you start studying a bit on your own and you learn to manage your time and you finish a few sections of Codecademy, this will give you the indication that you're actually ready to take the leap to build complex software, and then we'll be waiting here for you, but in a non-creepy way, by the way. Very non-creepy way. But I'll be waiting here for you. Obviously, if you have questions, I'm always happy to chat. If you're serious about joining Parsity, there's a link in the show notes, and I will see you around. That'll do it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. To learn more about becoming a software engineer with us, then check out parsity.io. If you're not quite ready for that, then jump into our dev30.xyz program, which is 30 days of working on your mindset, habits, and JavaScript skills. Totally worth it. See you next week.